Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual info session all about the Governor's School for the Arts Creative Writing Program. We're so glad to have you joining us today. As we wait to see if we've got a few more folks joining us, I encourage you to go into the chat feature, set it to messaging all panelists and all attendees, and say hi to the group, maybe share your name if you're comfortable with that, and what county you're coming from or what town you're coming from. Just that way you all get a sense of who's here with you today. We can see all of you, but I'd like for you all to have a sense of that as well. So pop into the chat feature, tell everyone hello. Hello, Delaney and Muhlenberg County. Hello to Gabrielle and Anderson, nice. Hi, Sarah, hi, Brianna. Hello, Tina. Hey, Alex from Raceland. That's right. I like the way you greeted your fellow artists, Emma. That's nice. Awesome. Well, while you all continue introducing yourselves in the chat, feel free to continue doing so. I'm also going to launch a poll. And again, this is just us getting to know each other a little bit more. Just curious if you're a student, a parent, in another category. And then we're also just curious if you've had a chance to review a recording of a previous virtual info session or attend one in real time. And if you had a chance to read the applicant guide for creative writing yet or not. Totally fine if you haven't attended an info session or haven't read the applicant guide yet. That's part of why we're here today, but just kind of helps us understand how to best tailor our presentation. So we'll give this just a few more seconds. All right, go ahead and end our poll, share these results with you all, and let's see who we have here today. Awesome, we have a lot of students, so good for you for taking control over your GSA application process and having the ambition to join us here today. And we've got a few parents here as well today, which is really nice. Thank you all for supporting your children's creative endeavors. Supportive and parents are amazing people that we do not take for granted and are also really wonderful resources for GSA applicants. So thank you all. And it looks like a lot of you have attended a virtual info session before, and it looks like every single person who responded to this poll has at least looked at the applicant guide, which is amazing. I salute you. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing the poll results and we'll get started. So first off, we'll do some introductions. So hello again, everyone. My name is Nick Kovalt. I'm the director of the Governor's School for the Arts. I am also an alum of our vocal music program. And I'm really thrilled to be joined today by one of our great faculty members and adjudicators, also a dear friend of mine. His name is Dan Burnett. Dan, hello, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Good to see everyone here, especially the potential applicants and parents of applicants. It's so exciting that there are these people who are supporting students in their endeavors.
We're glad to have you here, Dan. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I attended GSA in 2003, and then after that went to the University of Kentucky, studied arts administration and playwriting as well, and then went to get my master's in playwriting from the New School in New York City. And I lived in New York City for about 10 years, and now I currently live in San Marcos, Texas. Been here for the last few years, and I'm a writer and performer and playwright, and yeah, just pursuing that as my full-time endeavor right now.
Awesome. And Dan, like I said, you're on faculty and you're also one of our adjudicators, meaning that you actually you're one of the people that review the GSA creative writing applications and ultimately select the class. Why do you do this? Why is this a fun or interesting process for you, or a rewarding process?
Yeah, part of it is like I love giving back. I love, supporting young artists as they're going about it, because I just remember when I was a student, how important and like foundational that was to create me into the type of artist that I wanted to be and to push me in that direction so I can continue to pursue that. And then I also just love seeing what young people are writing, what they're working on, just seeing how people are creating stories and writing poems, and then how are they expressing emotions that they are feeling, or just trying to sort themselves out and just see what they're into. Yeah, so it's really just like curiosity to see like what is it that people want to create, and how can I potentially support them as a faculty member and encourage them to keep moving forward.
Awesome. Well, again, we're glad to have you here today. So folks, the way that today's conversation is going to work is I'm actually going to share my screen in a moment and take us through a quick fast facts presentation overview of GSA, non-art form specific, and make sure you're aware of some other resources available to you as applicants or parents. And then we're gonna jump over to the Creative Writing Applicant Guide, and then Dan and I are actually gonna look at that together. So I'm gonna share my screen, bear with me for just one moment, and we will get started. All right, so let's start out by reviewing some facts about the summer program. So GSA's summer program is a 3-week program, and it's also residential, meaning that students, faculty, and staff all live together on a college campus, which in 2021 and for the next few years after that will be the University of Kentucky. The summer program next year is going to take place from June 27th until July 17th. Students can attend GSA for one of 9 art forms, and the program is completely tuition free. Now, of course, it's too soon to know what the coming months are going to bring, but GSA is currently anticipating that the summer program will take place in person, even if there must be additional health and safety protocols put in place. So you're going to hear Dan and me talk about the summer program today with the assumption that we'll be in person. All GSA 2021 applicants must complete an online application that is due by end of day, January 10th, 2021. From there, some applicants will be invited to advance to a second and final round of auditions and reviews. So applicants learn whether they've advanced to that final round on February 19th. For those who do advance, that final audition or review is going to take place on March 19th or 20th. Again, we're still determining whether the final round will take place in person or virtually, and we plan on releasing more information in time for the finals announcement on February 19th, so hang tight and stay tuned. Finally, GSA releases a list of accepted students for GSA 2021 on April 16th, and we also announce a list of alternates for the summer program on that day. Students must currently be a sophomore or a junior to apply. We will not ask for your GPA, SAT, or ACT scores during the process, and you can apply for up to 2 art forms. There is an application fee of $30 that goes up to $35 total if you're applying in 2 art forms, but the fee is waived by the click of a button in the application for students who qualify for free reduced lunch. While we are thrilled to talk to you today about GSA's creative writing program, and we're confident that today is going to be helpful for you, remember, today's virtual info session is not going to be 100% comprehensive, and there are some other very important resources you should utilize to learn more about the program and the application, all of which are available on or linked from our website, which is KentuckyGSA.org. Be sure to read the applicant guide for your art form of interest. So I know everyone watching today has at least started that, but for those of you who might be watching a recording of this, make sure that you're reading the applicant guide thoroughly. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna review it later, but we're gonna really kind of breeze past some parts of it, so it will benefit you to take time to read it on your own. And finally, remember that today's info session is part of a whole series of info sessions that you can review or attend this fall. We started back in October with 3 sessions, GSA 101, where we really talked about the summer program overall, the application process overall. If you have questions about what a day in the life of GSA is like, which we'll talk a little bit about today, but what our residential life program is like, any questions like that that maybe are not specific to creative writing, I really encourage you to watch that GSA 101 webinar. We really cover it all in that webinar. We also had one about the applicant guide, specifically just walking through them, how to use them. We talk a lot about the recommendation process in the applicant guide webinar. So if you have more questions about that, I encourage you to check that out. And then the webinar that we did on October 29th was a walkthrough of the application portal, where we literally just walk through what it's like to complete an application from start to finish. We're doing these art form specific webinars in November and December, or we did do some in November, so those are all available via recording on our website. If you are interested in vocal music, that's our 9th and final one tomorrow, so you can still register for that. And then on December 17th, I'll be on Zoom just taking any Q&A that you might have before that January 10th deadline, because keep in mind we will be closed for the holiday season about the second half of December. Also, remember, you don't have to ask your question in a virtual info session to get it answered. We're on standby all the time to answer your unique and customized questions at gsainfo@kentuckyperformingarts.org. So please reach out anytime. There are no scary adults here waiting to judge you. We love chatting with you. It's one of the best parts of our job. It's our pleasure. And like I said, it's also our job. So we're here for you throughout this process. We're also on social media as well, so you can see on this slide. And remember, don't wait until the last minute to start your application, because that will mean that you aren't waiting until the last minute to ask your questions. The application portal is inevitably going to run a little bit slow in the last day or two before that January 10th deadline. Like I said, we're also going to be in and out of the office for the second half of December. So go ahead and get started now and make sure you're asking your questions nice and early. There is going to be a Q&A at the end of today's session. So I just ask that as you have questions during the info session today, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature in Zoom. Note that is different from the chat feature. So if you could just keep your questions in the Q&A feature, we'll come back to those at the end of the webinar. And finally, when I end the webinar today, you should get a survey link that pops up after we close out the webinar. You will also get a follow-up email. And we just ask that you take that survey because it really helps us understand our recruitment efforts, where we're doing well, and where we can improve. All right, so without further ado, let's talk a little bit about creative writing. So I'm going to pull up the applicant guide for creative writing, share my screen again. And how this is going to work is I will review a section of the applicant guide, and then I'll turn to Dan to ask him for his additional thoughts, and input that he might have. So just 1 second, let me bring that back up. Here we go. So when you pull up the applicant guide for creative writing on our website, this is what you'll see. And you'll see that the first section is a program description, which is just a description of what it's like to attend GSA for creative writing. So you know what you're getting yourself into in the first place. So I'll read this verbatim. It's the one time I'll really kind of read straight from the applicant guide. Students in the creative writing program receive intense, individualized, and small group instruction in all aspects of writing, from the formulation of ideas to revising, publishing, and performing. Students participate in classes, workshops, field trips, and individual conferences with faculty members who are published authors. Students also read aloud their works in progress, learn peer editing techniques, design and create their own chapbooks, and participate in several public readings, including a reading for family and friends on the final day of the program. GSA writers meet and learn from a variety of visiting professional writers and guest artists. So Dan, tell us a little bit more about what it's like to attend GSA for creative writing.
Yeah, so we take people through over the 3-week program the entire creative process. The first week we really focus on getting as many ideas out there as possible. We'll go to art museums, we'll go collaborate with dance and do some dance performances. There's all different ways that we find ways to get ideas. The second week we focus a lot on revision and editing and reviewing each other's work, critiquing that. And then during those first 2 weeks, you also create a chapbook, which is a collection of all the stuff that you've written while in residence at the program. And then the final week, we focus on writing for the stage, performance. We do a playwriting intensive. We teach you all how to perform your work. We talk about careers. There's so many different things that we do. So it's a really intense 3 weeks, but it's ultimately really, really useful and fruitful. Also, writers may be thinking that they mostly just write on their own and just focus and get in their heads and do that. There's plenty of that. We're also pretty social. We recognize that we really need each other as creatives and as individuals, and we all support each other within the group by listening to each other's work, by letting people know what's resonating for them, what's really the shining of the work that they're putting forward. So we're really kind of social as well. Also, no one needs to be afraid of us being very social. We're all welcoming and encouraging, and we intend to build a class that uses that and builds upon that foundation.
And something else I want to highlight, just because Dan, I think you all do this so well in creative writing, is that, and this happens across all non-art forums, that you have an opportunity to collaborate on occasion with other art forms as well. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. So we do a lot of different collaborations. Sometimes we'll be taking, film and photography. We'll be taking some pictures of different works that they're doing throughout the process, and then we'll write ekphrastic works responding to that. So it's we look at a photograph, and then what does this inspire? What story kind of comes to our mind, and we're able to create from that. We've done student performances in the past that used that work, and then they just created their own performance out of that. We've done a dance collaboration as well, where writers will be writing based on what movement they're seeing, and then sometimes the dancers will also do some writing, and the creative writers will start to move and explore what movement is for them. And we recognize that everything that we're kind of experiencing, we try to do as much collaboration as possible, but what we're experiencing informs what it is that we're going to write. So by trying to have as many different expressive experiences as we possibly can, we use all of that to just continue to generate more and more material.
Awesome. All right, so we will jump back into the applicant guide now and continue on with the next section, which is very timely, very relevant to the part of the process that we're in. Section 2, preliminary round application requirements. So this is everything that you as creative writer applicants, applicants rather, have to upload into your GSA application by January 10th. So you'll see that we have this list here, A, B, C, D, E, and the rest of this section details out each of these listed items in more detail. So let's start by talking about the recommendation forms. I want to point out that there's a lot of information in the applicant guide. You can see all of it here about the rec forms, how to identify recommenders, what they fill out on your behalf, whether or not you need something like a letter of recommendation. But the short version of the story is that you have to identify 2 recommenders. One of them is a school administrator, something like a counselor or a vice principal. If you don't have someone like that in your educational community, we have, again, information in here on what to do. And then a teacher recommender. We generally recommend that your teacher recommender is someone who knows you as a writer, if possible, as an artist, if possible. If you don't have that person in your life, that's totally okay. It just needs to be someone who knows you as a student and as a learner. So Dan, tell us a little bit more about how you as an adjudicator use these recommendation forms and maybe any tips for folks on how to select their recommender or conversations to have with their recommenders.
Sure. I would definitely encourage you to find a recommender. I mean, maybe they're not familiar with you as a writer, but they know your growth. Who have you been? Who have you turned into? What might have you, become since you've known that person? You really just focus on who can speak the best to your ability to grow within the program, because that's really what we're looking for, is finding people who are really excited about learning, who really want to collaborate with each other, who may be having, just a great time just like exploring new ideas. We also look at the recommender forms if somebody has maybe overcome something, or it's like we just to give a bit more color on what is this applicant, like who are they, what have they gone through, what might they have experienced, that we're not able to see through anything else that's submitted. So with this is like the one part of the application where someone else is able to highlight who you are, that is either supporting what it is that you're putting out there. Everything else in the application is essentially you putting yourself forward. This is who I am, this is who I see myself, and someone else is just continuing to support you and setting you up for this great opportunity.
Awesome. All right, well, speaking of the parts of the application that are more directly from the students, that takes us to the next part of the preliminary round application, which is as I scroll down here, the personal short essay and the personal question video. So we're gonna kind of bundle these in our conversation today because they're essentially both responses from you to essay prompts. It's just that one is a written response and one is a verbal response. So looking first at the personal short essay, this is the written response, a maximum of 250 words. You're creative writers, you're well suited for this type of response. We're asking you to let us know, or respond to rather, the prompt, describe your personal connection to your art form or creative practice. Why and how is it important to you on a personal level? And then the personal question video is sort of the extrinsic version of that question, if you will. Describe your vision for how your individual artistic work or creative practice can impact others. How do you want to affect others through art, and or what response do you hope others have to your work? I want to emphasize that for this video, using your smartphone in your living room at home is totally acceptable. Please do not go out and hire a professional film crew or build a theater in your living room in order to respond to these. We want these to be laid back. Definitely put your best foot forward. Choose good lighting. Make sure we can hear you as best you can. But know that we, especially right now, we're all at home doing the best we can with what we have. We understand that you may have limited resources, and also smartphones are amazing and they make great videos, so we're not worried about it. Dan, tell us a little bit more about how you use these responses as an adjudicator and what students should be thinking about as they craft their responses.
Sure. With both of these, we get to see who you are as a person, and just seeing like what is it this person has experienced. Why do they write? Like what is it that drives them? What I'd encourage for both of these is that try to be as specific as possible. Is there some type of moment? Was there some type of thing that happened in your life? Which did you suddenly discover, like, oh my gosh, like this is what I can do with words, and this is what I can do with my life? Like, what kind of surprised you, within this? That what happens when we start to review like the many applications that come through is that sometimes like we'll hear a little clip of something where it's like, okay, this makes me remember that person. And sometimes people don't have that. And we just kind of like, all right, well, all we have really is just the writing sample, which is really the main thing that we look for is like, how well does this person write? But if we can get a little bit more about like, who are you? What are you about? What inspires you? What motivates you? What's driving you to do all this? Why is this important to you? And just really diving within yourself to be like, okay, what is this? What does this mean to me? The more we can kind of get something really specific about you, the better off we're able to see your application as a whole and consider everything that it is that you're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I think the word that keeps coming up in all these conversations about these essay responses is authenticity. It's in the applicant guide as well. And if I may, Dan, let me know if I say anything you disagree with, but be more concerned with just showing us who you are and less of telling us what you think we're going to find to be the most profound thing we've ever heard about art. We're more interested in just knowing who you are and getting a sense of that.
Absolutely.
All right. Jumping back into the applicant guide. So moving past the personal short essay and the personal question video, I want to pause on the next section, which is art form specific questions. This is a change from the application or an addition to it if you have applied for GSA in the past, but it's nothing too huge or too daunting. We're just essentially going to ask you a few questions in your application about your interest in writing. We will ask you to respond to a couple prompts, short writing prompts, and I do mean short. And we'll also ask you some questions about your level of access to things like, creative writing club or a writing class at school, or those things that that you have at your school or that you've participated in. It's really, really important. I know Dan and I both really feel this way. Really important for us to emphasize that there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. We are not secretly looking for one profile of a student over another. If both of your parents are poet laureates and you've been taking creative writing class since you were 3, we want to know that. If you feel like you were the only person writing, creatively in your entire, circle or your entire town, we want to know that. That's fine too. We're really, again, just looking to learn a little bit more about you and also just the context of your application. This will just allow us to understand you more holistically as an applicant. So please answer these honestly. And remember, we're going to love knowing your answers, whatever they are, just as long as they're truthful. So Dan, do you have anything else to add about that?
Yeah, this really helps us understand the context in which you're developing. As Nick said, there are no right or wrong answers, but I mean, sometimes it's like if we see an application where it's like they've had a lot of creative writing help, and then like we read the manuscript and it's like I'm not able to see that, then that says something completely different of like, what is this mind-blowing manuscript? And it's like they're writing by themselves. Whoa, this is so neat. That it's like it allows us to see you holistically and in context with everyone else who is also applying, so that when we build our class, we're having a representative sample from the entire state.
Awesome. All right. So up next, the manuscript. So of course, this is a pretty important part of your application. This is where we actually get to see your writing skills directly. So the manuscript has a lot of formatting guidelines, or well, I don't want to say a lot, but a few formatting guidelines here that you need to follow. So we talk about margins, font, length. And if Dan wants us to talk a little bit more about any of those specifically in a moment, we certainly can. One thing that I want to point out for our creative writers is that we are asking that your manuscript fall under one of the following categories. So this is the first sentence of the manuscript section. Those categories are fiction, poetry, playwriting, or creative nonfiction. So we're asking for a manuscript that falls into one of those categories. Which category you select is going to slightly affect how you start your application. So you actually need to make this selection before you start your application. And what I mean, and a lot of you are probably nodding your heads because you've seen this if you've started your application, is when you apply for creative writing at GSA, you have to in the application portal choose if you're applying for creative writing poetry or creative writing fiction, playwriting, creative nonfiction. You are all applying for the same creative writing program. There's not a poetry program and then another creative writing program. The reason that those are different is you'll see in a moment the criteria are different. So we kind of have to build that into the application portal. So all that said, it's pretty simple. Just choose creative writing for the genre of manuscript that you are going to be submitting. Let's see, I'm going to pause there and see what Dan has to offer about the manuscript, what to consider, what you're looking for, how you read these.
Sure. An additional bit about, when you're picking creative writing, which of the kind of subsections you have of that. That's really just for us as adjudicators when we're allocating out who's reading what. Typically, we'll have someone who is stronger in poetry or is a poet reading the ones who are submitting for poetry, and then people who, are playwrights or fiction writers who are being read by people within that discipline as well. So that's really just, it makes it easier to sort when we're going through all the applications. If you happen to submit, like if you thought, all right, I signed up for fiction and I submitted a poetry manuscript, oh my God, they're not going to read it. That's not the case at all. Like we read everything that comes our way. Everything is going to be read and given full attention when we're able to go through it. Yeah, so that's really just there are guidelines in there to ensure that we as adjudicators are giving the best view and the best perspective on the submissions that are being delivered to us.
Awesome. All right, jumping back to the applicant guide. So the next section, we're not going to cover in too much detail, but I just want to point out it's here for your review. It's the final round requirements, section 3. So this is an overview of what will be asked of you if you are forwarded on to the second and final round of creative writing reviews. So you can visualize your success and read through this just so you have a sense of what you would go through in March if you're deemed a finalist for GSA. Keep in mind that we are still figuring out whether or not this final round is going to be in person or virtual. It's usually in person, but just know that if it is virtual, we're going to develop a process that's sort of in the spirit of this. So it's still pretty relevant for you no matter what. So take a look at that when you have a moment. But again, nothing that you need to worry about just now, because right now we're focused on that January 10th initial application deadline. But the next section is really important. It's the criteria section. So criteria are literally what your application is being scored on. So if you were to look at the score sheet that Dan had in front of him while he's reviewing your application, it looks just like this sheet here, except there'd be scoring numbers underneath it. So you'll see that we have criteria for fiction, creative nonfiction, and playwriting manuscripts, and then we have our criteria for poetry manuscripts. So just take a look at that depending on what manuscript you're submitting. You'll see that we have the criteria listed and then a sentence about how an ideal candidate would exhibit that criteria. So looking at language here, and then there's a paragraph about how an ideal candidate would exhibit language in their manuscript. Moving along into the criteria section, I also want to point out that there is criteria for all creative writing applicants, regardless of what manuscript you submit, what type of manuscript you submit. The bottom two are for the final round only, so don't worry about those just now, but I want to point your attention to this piece of criteria, dedication to art form, growth, and community. This is actually the one piece of criteria that's present across all 9 art forms, and this is really important to us because we're not just looking for the best writers and the best painters and the best actors at GSA. We're looking for holistic human beings who are ready for the challenge of GSA and who we really see as the future of artist citizenry in the Commonwealth. So, GSA is an intense program. So we're looking for folks who are excited about the idea of living, breathing, sleeping their art form from dawn till dusk, 7 days a week for 3 weeks. We're looking for students who are interested in growing and interested in being challenged to grow. If you are a perfect writer and you have nothing else to learn about creative writing, I'm here to tell you this is not the program for you. We salute you, we congratulate you, but GSA is a growth opportunity. And GSA is also a community of artists. We really consider ourselves as a community more than a school. So we're looking for folks who we see are gonna have some kind of contribution to that community. Does that mean that you need to be the person running for class president or something like that? Absolutely not. There are a lot of ways to contribute to community, but we're looking for folks who are we see playing a role in that community one way, shape, or form. A couple other things about criteria before I turn it back over to Dan. I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit. This criteria is not weighted, which means that there is not one piece of this criteria that is secretly more important than another. There is no secret formula that we're hiding behind our backs. And again, that's really because we want to look at you holistically and in full context. Because for some of you, some parts of this criteria are going to be more impactful to us for one reason or another than maybe some other parts are. And then finally, this criteria is not in this document just as an FYI, so you know what Dan's score sheet looks like. These are resources and tools that you can use. So as you're putting your manuscript and your materials together, show us these things. If you're trying to choose between two pieces or two genres, maybe ask yourself, do one of the two show these items for you and your skill set more than another? So that's just one example of a way that you can use the criteria to your benefit. So Dan, anything else to add about the criteria from your perspective?
Yeah, we've refined that over many, many years just to see like how are we really evaluating these applications. Because initially it was like, hey, send us, 5 to 7 pages and then we'll read it and we'll tell you, whether you're making it to the second round. And it's like there's a lot of kind of gray happenings in there where it's like, what is it that they're actually reading for? That with this, it helps us as adjudicators to see, okay, how are they working on structure? How are they looking at language? How are they looking at character development? How are they using metaphor? What's the rhythm of their language? So it's giving us as many different ways of like, here's how we're reacting to your manuscript so that we can have a good sense of like, okay, based when we're looking at the adjudication at the very end of like, here are the scores that everybody has gotten, we're able to see like, okay, these are on average, these are the stronger ones. So we're probably going to advance them to the next round. So it's giving us a chance so that we're as consistent and clear in our adjudication. And it also is, as Nick was saying, gives you a way to see kind of in our minds, like, what is it that we're reacting to? How are we kind of measuring your manuscript up with this rubric that we now have? And also that's really great writing tips too, like things to remember, like conflict resolution and ambition and relationships and just all these things that are related to writing and storytelling and ways of creating work. That like this is just kind of what we what we see as work to aspire to. Also, people can completely take these rules and throw them out the window in a constructive artistic way, where it's like, whoa, they're doing things with language that we were not expecting from a high school student, or they're just doing this and they're kind of blowing our minds in how strong their writing is. There's sometimes like that extra factor where it's like, what is it that is really driving this person forward? Like, I noticed that, there was a student last year who came to the program, he gave me some of his poems to read during the middle of the process. And I just noticed like, I'm having like a physical reaction to the work that I just didn't notice in reading other people's works, where I was slowing my own breath in the way that I was engaging with this. And I told him like, whoa, like maybe play with pacing, because like this is a really rich thing to do with the way that you're creating, the way that you're writing. But like, let's see it from another angle. How can you use the ways that we're kind of evaluating your work as ways that you're expressing yourself and using them as tools. So yeah, maybe long-winded way.
That's great.
but yeah, it's really, this is the exciting part, where it's like we get to see what it is that people are writing. And this is like, the whole application is important, but like this is the primary thing. This is what you're submitting for us to see, are you a writer? And how well are you expressing yourself as a writer at this point in your life? And we're just super excited to see what it is that you all have to share with us.
And a really important theme that I think you hit on just now, Dan, is that in the criteria, we're explaining things that we're looking for, but remember that we are looking for you to express those and show us those in your own unique way, right? So, like you were saying, Dan, there's no one right way. And again, jump in here if I'm wrong, Dan, because you're the writer. But there's no one right way to do language, right?
No,
Right, exactly.
no, there's not.
And I saw.
What I feel like the adjudicators is like, what journeys are you taking us on? What emotions are you expressing? Like, it's really like words are kind of like skin on the body of like everything else that you're experiencing. Like, what's happening within this work and underneath this? That it's like that's kind of what we're really looking for. And another part is, as I was reading through some of the rules of like figurative language or similes or metaphors, like don't go through your entire thing and be like, I need to put a simile in here because there's a simile on the rubric. It's like, no, does the simile support the story you're telling? Like that's really the important stuff, is like, how are these guidelines, like how is everything that I put into my text supporting the story that I'm telling? That's the most important thing.
Right. Everything's an intentional choice, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I do want to just jump over to a question that I see came in because I think it's very relevant to this conversation. And the person who asked this, maybe we've answered it in the process of this conversation, but they said, are there specific categories that you're looking for in reading a manuscript? For example, specifically for fiction, character development, imagery, plot, anything like that. This is it. The criteria, I think, is the backbone to developing that answer for yourself to that question, if I understand your question correctly. So thank you for that. All right. Actually, before we jump back to the applicant guide, I think this is a good chance just to talk about another topic that I try to be really transparent about anytime we talk about GSA, which is just that this is a competitive program to get into. And I do not bring this up to intimidate anyone or discourage anyone. In fact, I kind of bring it up for the opposite reason, which is to encourage you to apply despite of that. So just to give you some stats around this, there are about 256 spots at the GSA summer program. 28 of those are usually for creative writing. For those 256 spots, we'll usually see about 1,400 applicants. Dan, I'm sorry to put you on a spot. Do you have a sense of approximately how many creative writing applicants we see each year? Do you recall?
It's between 160 and 200.
Okay, for those 28 spots. So, this is a difficult program to get into, but we do not have 28 spots in the creative writing program because there are 28 talented writers in the state of Kentucky every year. There are far more than that, and the reason that the program is the size it is has to do with boring things like funding and administrative capacity. Every year, we turn away students that it breaks our heart to turn away because we know that they deserve this program. We want to work with them. So ultimately, if this does not go in the direction that you hope it will, that is not a referendum on your talent or your potential as an artist. I'm here to tell you that GSA is great, but there are a lot of Kentucky artists who are doing amazing things that never went to this program. And we believe that you have power and potential no matter what. Another thing is that this application process is designed to serve you regardless of whether or not you get into GSA. On the other side of this application, you're going to be more prepared for things like college applications, applying to other arts programs. You're going to have learned something about yourself as an artist, as a human. So we also encourage you to apply just because you want to do it for yourself and you want to go in that growth journey and because you are worth that. So all that said, we certainly hope we get to work with you. But we just feel like it's important to emphasize that not getting in this program does not by any means mean that we don't like you or that we don't like your work or that you don't have promise. Dan, anything else you want to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like GSA is one point on many possible journeys to be an artist and to be a creative professional. There's so many different ways that you can go about doing this that, yes, GSA is a wonderful opportunity. It's also not the only opportunity that's available. I mean, the biggest things that that students get out of the program is finding a community. And you can build that without going to the program. You can find other writers, you can find other people. And especially now with the internet and just so many different ways of connecting with people, and especially during COVID, it's like, I mean, we've all had to kind of like, be isolated. That how are we finding connection? How are we finding, ways of reaching one another? I do remember that when I was in high school, one of my good friends applied for GSA in creative writing, and I applied as well. I got into the program. She did not, and then she just stopped writing. She was like, "Oh, okay, well, this is not for me. This is not for me." And I'd say that in so many different environments and during the interviews, that it's like, don't rob the world of your voice because one person said no to you. If anything, it's like, okay, they may not be your audience, and that's okay. It's like, then you go get to find other audiences and you go get to create that. Like, there's to be an artist, like there's so many different forms of quote unquote rejection that may emerge, and the biggest thing is to continue to be resilient and to continue to put your work out there and to push yourself forward, because ultimately you are the only person who's going to do that in your life. So find that journey and that strength within, because it is the most important journey that you could possibly take.
Well said. And I always say, if you think about an artist or an author that you idealize. You know, everyone watching this today, think of that person, the first person that comes to your mind. I am willing to bet you money that that person has heard no more than they've heard yes, but they are still where they are today. So it's a, you know, maybe a not a joyous part of the artist's journey necessarily, but a necessary one, and one that can be helpful in your growth and propelling you forward. So that being said, we hope we get to work with all of you next summer. Visualize your success, believe in yourself, but it's, I think, an important part of the process for us to discuss. So I'm going to jump back into the applicant guide real quick. We're almost through our applicant guide review, and it's almost time for Q&A. I see some great questions coming in. Keep them coming if you have them. So moving past the criteria section, I just want to point out that there is a tips section. Again, these are tips that we designed specifically for this process, things that we've seen before that we want to, you know, point you in the right direction about, you know, maybe ways to best prepare yourself, or maybe some things to avoid that will help your application. We also have an application timeline at the end of the applicant guide in case you need a reminder of some of the dates. So Dan, while we wait for some folks to maybe throw in a couple more questions if they have them, like I said, we have a tip section there. Any kind of top 2 or 3 tips that you might have for folks in this conversation?
Yeah, the biggest thing, there's within the manuscript, it says, you know, specifically, do not include an excerpt from a longer work. And the biggest thing that we kind of ran into, and what made us add that to this document, is that sometimes people would have a really awesome premise, and then by the end of the 7 pages, it's like a cliffhanger, and it's like, no, I want to see you like finish this. Like, please show me that you can finish it, because it's like there's really interesting premises that writers can come up with, where it's like, oh, I would really love to see you develop this over the course of a much longer work, but like we wanted between 5 and 7 pages of a complete work. And sometimes that ultimately works against people, because it's like, okay, well, you had like a really great idea, and then like you're not able to finish it. That it's like we kind of want to see people be able to complete the journey that they're starting to take us on. That's really like an important part, especially with writing, that it's like, okay, please do that. And also like have like, I mean, I'm speaking from like a fiction storytelling, like a playwriting perspective, but it's just like, have your characters make decisions, don't have things just happen to them. Like make them do something, like they're like, what, make them like advance towards something, because sometimes we've seen applications where it's just like, like why don't they just do something else. Like sometimes that's just a fun thing as an exercise, just to like take your characters through. It's just like, all right, well, what if they made a completely opposite decision from something that they thought they were going to do, and then see what happens. Yeah, and mostly it's just like we want to be entertained. Like it's like, just take us on journeys, take us like, you know, to places, like whether or not like that's like an, you know, entertaining, like funny haha thing, or something that's really emotional, and take us through. Yeah, like that's the thing, is like we really want to enjoy it, that it's like, take us, yeah, just, and your reader does too. I mean, ultimately, you know, whether you get in GSA or you have books later in your life, or who knows, maybe next year, who knows what kind of writers you all are, this is exciting. But it's like, there's we want to experience it, and your reader does too. You are on
Sorry.
mute. All right, welcome back.
One question that we got that relates well to that is, and I think this is a great example of, you know, how folks are kind of thinking through the guidelines and where they may intersect with kind of their artistic journey and writing. This person has asked, I want to include 4 flash fiction pieces that work into a story cycle, or that work in a story cycle. Is that appropriate to include if it still fits the page limit?
Cool, I want to read it. Yes, like do it. I mean, that's also a really cool thing that sometimes people do with their chapbooks when they're in the program, is kind of make like a thematic collection. I mean, that's just really fun to read, and just see like, how is somebody going about doing this. Yeah, cool idea. Do it. I want to see it.
Awesome. I'm going to answer some questions that are pretty straightforward. Dan, if you want to chime in, let me know, but these are maybe less creative writing related. Can we upload extra recommendations? No, you cannot. In fact, once you get in the recommendation process, you'll see you're actually not uploading recommendations at all. You're just giving us your recommenders' email addresses, just the 2 that we described earlier, and then we shoot an email off to those folks, and we take care of the rest of the process for them. So that's all you have to do, is identify those 2 email addresses. Someone asked this really great question. Do students get to see the score sheet for their application? And is there feedback from the adjudicators? Unfortunately, there is not. We certainly wish that we could provide that. But just with 1,400 applications across 9 art forms, each with their own very specific details and quirks, that's just something that we don't have the administrative capacity to do. Because it would fall on the administrative team, which is a small group of folks, and we just are unable to provide that. So unfortunately, we can't, but we appreciate the question. And then someone asked, will being a sophomore decrease my chance of getting into GSA versus someone who is a junior? Dan, you may have input on this. The way I usually describe this is that it will not decrease your chance of getting in. Every year we have sophomores get into GSA. What I will say is, if I mentioned there's 28 spots in the creative writing program, if we are on that 28th spot and trying to fill that last spot, and we have a sophomore and junior that are just so difficult to choose between, we may choose that junior because we know they're going to lose the opportunity to attend GSA, they're going to age out, and put that sophomore on the alternate list and really, really, really hope that they reapply. And sophomores, I also want to remind you that let's say it's not in the cards for you to get into GSA as a sophomore for some reason or another. You are going to be so much better prepared to apply for GSA as a junior because you applied as a sophomore. So there's all sorts of reasons to apply as a sophomore. Dan, anything else to add?
Just absolute agreement and enthusiasm for everything that you just said. Yes. Yeah, it's like I mean, I think we've always had sophomores in class. I think one year we had a class of exclusively juniors. But yeah, it's just like even in doing the application the first time, like you're getting your experience and of submitting these applications, because this is what a lot of writers end up doing, is just like kind of submitting their work and seeing, if people are going to respond to it. That the more reps you can get in of doing this, the more successful you're going to be as a writer. And yeah, just do it. And you may also discover things about yourself as you're doing it. Like, I mean, I've applied for grants in the past that I, thought I kind of botched the first time that I did it, and I did. And then the second time I applied, I got it. And it was just like, okay, cool. You learn about, how to fill these things out and express yourself as a creative individual and talk about your work. As the more you do it, the more you kind of understand how it is that you go about generating work.
And Dan, for someone who may have applied last year and is applying this year, what do you think about someone submitting a story that they submitted last year, but it's been revised since then?
I would, well, I don't feel like there's enough information, because like, like the first thing that's going through my mind is like, what do you mean by revise? Because like sometimes people are just like, okay, like I wrote the story and then like I changed a few words and a few lines and some paragraphs and maybe the ending's a little different, and I'm like, but did you really revise it? Like, have you like completely rewritten the whole thing? Like what's something new that you discovered about it? That I would be hesitant to submit something that I just simply like revised, unless it's like a major revision that's happened. However, I say that and it's like, well, maybe like if they applied last year and they were applying again this year, then maybe they are one of the sophomores that were, somebody that we were like, okay, cool, like please reapply. But like we kind of, I don't know. I would encourage people to opt for what is the evolution of their work and how are they kind of going about, creating new work, than necessarily doing the same thing again or the same story again. That I'm like, I don't know. Like there's really like there's no right or wrong answer to that. I'm just kind of like thinking through like all the different ways that I would try to approach that. It's just like how well revised is it? What journey are you taking us on? Yeah. That one thing that I would say absolutely for sure is like, do not submit the same PDF. There's like the same exact manuscript again. It's like, just do something different. But you could also like, like this is another part of the adjudication process, is like the person who read your manuscript last year may not be the same person who reads it again this year. That like you have different adjudicators having different reactions and different responses. That like ultimately it's like how strongly do you feel about your work, and the how well you're expressing the story that you want to take us on, and articulating your artistic vision for this submission. And yeah, just if you are fully believe in it, then do it, and you'll you'll see the response from this, and then that also then leads into, this is not the only audience for your work. So that's something else.
Yeah. No, I think
lots of things involved.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, though, I think you highlighted some really important things. First off, that what we're doing with these guidelines is giving you all guideposts through which you can make your own intentional decisions about your own work. And then we are going to look at the decisions you made, and and we're gonna maybe ask you at some point, especially in the final round, like, why did you choose to do this or include this? And chances are you are the only person who is going to have that answer. You're at least the best person to have that answer. How about that? And so if you choose to or if you think that for instance, a revised piece that you submitted last year, if that is really the best way for you to show your skill level through the criteria that we show, just tell us why you made that choice. We're going to be interested in knowing, and you may very well have a very great answer that blows our minds. So again, all of this is about the choices that you get to make as an artist. Dan, we have some good questions about manuscripts and specifically poetry. Before we get to the poetry questions, I just want to emphasize that you can only submit one manuscript, or that we're asking you to only submit one manuscript for creative writing. A good question that we've received is, well, we said that you could apply for up to 2 art forms. Can you use your 2 art forms to apply for 2 different types of manuscripts? And we don't put you in that direction. Just if you're going to apply for creative writing, you just submit one manuscript. You can't submit 2 different manuscript genres, and that counts as 2 applications. You just get 1 creative writing application. And Dan, in terms of poetry manuscripts, can folks include mini poems in their manuscript? Can they be like a mashup of different types of poems and poems on different themes?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And you can also, because we're giving you a limited number of pages for poetry, you don't have to start a new poem on a new page. You can just continue, the flow of the language, because ultimately it's like we have this 5 to 7 page range for how long it essentially takes to read like a full fiction piece. That poetry takes up less space on average than that. So yeah, just do it.
Great. And somebody asked, and I really appreciate this question, what do you mean by manuscript? So I just want to again point out, going back to the applicant guide real quick, all we mean by manuscript is what you see here in the formatting guidelines. So we're looking for a writing sample that is typed, double spaced, 5 to 7 pages, and so on, in one of the genres that we described above. So we are just asking for a writing sample that fits those guidelines when we use that word manuscript. Thanks for asking that. Another question I really appreciate someone asking. I'm considering submitting a piece of poetry that covers some sensitive topics, specifically mental health related topics. This person, the way they worded their question is, how far is too far? But Dan, speak to us about, maybe the topics or areas that might be sensitive to writers, and anything you want them to think through as they choose whether or not to include those in their manuscripts.
Yeah, nothing's off limits. I mean, we encourage everyone to just explore what it is that they want to explore. If there is something that is, I mean, if you're having any concerns, and not specifically about what you've addressed, but like if there's any concern of like, I'm afraid that this might not be viewed the way that, like, if you need to provide any type of like context or preface, then you can definitely include that either within your artist statement that you're submitting, the 250 word portion, or you can also include that as just kind of a note before each piece, if you really wanted us to have some of that context. That's really just kind of like just have it as a footnote, because let your work be the strongest thing that you're submitting to us, and not like the I guess the justification for the work, or like the context for the work. But yeah, I mean, absolutely nothing is off limits for us. We would rather know than not know. And I mean, especially like within the program as well, it's like we encourage people to like just continue to write what it is that they want to write and explore that, and then we support them in continuing to further that artistic vision. So I could also go on a whole tangent on like self-censorship and how how detrimental that is to an individual artist, and continuing your growth, but I feel like I may have said enough about that.
I think we need to have a whole series with Dan Burnett. Dan, for poetry, we mentioned that manuscripts have to be double spaced except for poetry. So someone's asked, well, are there guidelines for spacing in poetry or anything that we need to be within, the border on in terms of spacing for poetry?
Just single spaced is fine. There's nothing. I would in that instance I would just be careful of like, where are you putting line breaks? How are you separating stanzas? How are you, just placing this on the page? There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of like play with poetry. Yeah, I hope that answers it. If
And
not,
I
then
just want to
send me another question.
And I
That's
want
what we're here
to
for.
echo something that you said earlier, Dan, just to make sure that I'm correct, that you do not have to start a new poem on a new page. You can.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct. You can
thank you.
let it keep flowing.
Someone's asked a question that I think, again, kind of illustrates, how folks can make artistic choices that are the strongest possible for their manuscript and for putting their best foot forward. This specific question is, how much dialogue should a story have if you're writing a story? Is one section of dialogue enough? And so I think kind of going back though, zooming out from this specific question, Dan, in terms of thinking like, oh, am I using enough similes, like you mentioned earlier? Do I have enough dialogue in the story? How can students kind of manage that thought process and that decision-making process in their manuscripts development?
Yeah, I would think of it in terms of, how is this dialogue supporting the story that you're saying? And this is kind of the more in time in terms of like getting into the class that we do is just like, finding what is that right balance? Like maybe this person is maybe there's a lot of dialogue and there's like a long like monologue that they do and they're speaking for a really like long period of time where it's just like, well, what's driving them to speak for so long? What's driving them to do that it becomes more about like it's not like there's a very clear balance of like X% needs to be this and Y% needs to be that. It's more like how is this supporting the story that you're telling? That it becomes more of like an artistic choice of, this is why I'm doing doing it the way that I'm doing it. One thing that I would recommend is as you're going through this is for everybody actually. Like I'm so glad you asked this question because I'm like sparking one of the things that I was like, I need to make sure that I say this. Read through your manuscript out loud before you submit. Like read it out loud because you're going to find so many things in terms of pacing, in terms of rhythm, in terms of how words sound together. Because when we're reading it, like we're kind of saying the words in our head, and like sometimes I'm even like reading the words out loud as I'm going through and reading through the entire manuscript. That like you're going to find a lot of cool things that you can kind of like change about your work. And I've actually found that as a revision technique to be like the most useful in terms of everything. I mean, yeah, just read it out loud and fill your room with your own words.
And someone else has also asked, going back to our question about content earlier, are swear words or adult language allowed? And I would, I'll just actually turn it over to you, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, they are. I mean, like you want to, if I'm like, write what you want to write, guys. Like, but also it's like, I mean, if there's any fear of like, oh, if I use this word, am I going to be kicked out? It's like, no. Like we would be more concerned of like, okay, if someone submits like a whole thing that's just a lot of swear words, where it's just like, what is this? Why are they doing it? Why are they using the language? But like we're already thinking of like, why are they using the words that they're using to explain something or to express something, as we're reading through anyway. That like if it's supporting you and your artistic vision, then I encourage you to do it. That yeah, like it's really about like how are you expressing yourself as an artist, and are you achieving your goal? That like you may one of the biggest divides that I feel like artists actually have, and just communicators in general, is like my intention is to express this, and then the actual impact of my expression is this. How close are they to each other that your intention and your impact match up? That if you intend to be like, I'm gonna be like the big cursing artist, it's just like, well, it like are you doing this for your like are we your audience for that? Which is kind of like taking it to the extreme, but like if you're gonna like just drop a few words here and there of that maybe a bit more colorful than others, then you can do that. It's like, how is it supporting you and your artistic vision?
Yeah, and I say go back to the criteria too. I mean, if it is servicing your ability to show us, descriptive language in service to the story, or character development, or the voice of your poetry, and you can speak to how that is contributing into it, then that's gonna, probably make for a strong manuscript. But like Dan said, we don't have limitations on what you can include in your manuscript in terms of language or in terms of content. And like Dan said, that's because we want you to write what you want to write. And that's just a very important part of this process, which I have a sneaking suspicion is going to be part of the answer to our third to last question. So this is our last question from the Q&A, and then I'm going to follow up with 2 questions of my own, Dan. And it's funny because we've actually gotten the same question asked in opposite ways. Is there any genre of story that we should stray away from, or is there any genre that is more respected and valued by the judges than others?
In years past, and I don't know if this is true with me anymore, but like in years past, like sometimes there would be like vampires or zombies or things like that, where it's like it's more fantasy based, and I'm not really that type of writer, but it's actually as a result of like teaching at GSA and working with writers who do explore more of that apocalyptic work, that it's like, oh, I'm able to see it and like just in a different way. That like part of me is like, well, like I used to be kind of judgy about that, but now I'm like, no, because it's just like these can be really interesting metaphors for how society is operating. Like, I feel like zombies were really popular for a period of time because like we're just automatically going forward and we're dead inside. Like, like, wow, that's very fascinating. That like, yeah, it's just like I want to be taken on journeys that it's just like, if you are doing that, with the elegance and grace and great artistry, then I'm like, heck yeah, let's do it. Like I want to see what's being created. Yeah, it's just like authenticity is the word. Yeah, authenticity is so important, that it's like, or if you feel like this is the thing that's well, thank you, Chloe. I saw your message. I was like, please, I want everyone to be 100% confident in applying to GSA. Like, it's just like, just do it, because like we'll see what happens. Like, yeah, that's really, yeah, I'm just gonna say, yeah, really, over and over and over again, because I just really want to read stuff. So yeah, there's nothing that's off limits. There's nothing that's off limits. I mean, there's nothing that's more successful than others. It's really like, how well do you do it? And yeah, I mean, does that answer it? I don't know. I like usually like I see like all the nods of the students in the room, and it's
Yes,
like, okay, cool. And now it's just like, but I
No.
appreciate the people who are posting and saying like, yes, like this is now I'm getting it. That like I just want to make sure that like I'm getting through and encouraging you all to just develop your
Yeah.
own vision.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're illustrating really important points and saying them very well. I mean, again, to sort of provide my own personal reflection on what you just said, maybe some of the genres you described are, if you can write them in your original way as an artist, and show us character development, show us really interesting language, then like go for it. Maybe though, if you're writing something because it's just a reflection of something else that you think is great, and you're just trying to reproduce that great thing that you see or that you read, and you're just trying to reproduce that, maybe that's not telling us as much about you as an individual artist as much as just like some other great thing that you think is awesome. Is that a fair way to describe that, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I mean, I have done that as a writer, where it's just like, oh my gosh, this one thing, and I want to do it just like that. And it's like you find out during the way that it's like, maybe this is not what I need to do. Like maybe you need to do that to get to the next thing in terms of what you're writing. Maybe you needed to write that the derivative work for to get to that next part of your own way of creating. Yeah. And also, like, I want to say this to people as well. Like, I encourage people during the program, but like, it just needs to be said all the time. Like, don't be afraid to like throw stuff out and just start all over. Like, essentially, like, I feel like that's one of the best things that I learned about revision is just like in school, like just taking a scene and just immediately throwing like the entire thing away and then start like writing that scene again, like actually rewriting something. I feel like you can really learn a lot about what it is that you're actually exploring in doing that as well. So, you know, don't do it at the last minute, but don't be afraid to do it. Like, don't be precious about your work.
Yeah, I think you know, there's a couple things that we've really illustrated today is that you know, we just want to see who you are as an artist. Don't be afraid of you know, trying to just like fit into a box of what you think we're looking for. And like I said over and over again, and Dan has really illustrated this a lot too, there is no secret equation here. We are telling you everything that we want to see in the applicant guide. Like, there's nothing we're not telling you. And if there's something that we specifically don't tell you not to do, then, and you're interested in doing it, it probably means that you can explore doing it. So, you know, if you want to, yeah, I see another question came in. If you want to, you know, get funky with your you know, lowercase and uppercase and breaking grammatical, you know, rules and your poetry because it contributes to the work, go for it. We can't wait to read it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so Dan, two final questions. The first one is, and we're probably going to repeat some things we've said already, which is fine. But if somebody is on the fence about applying for GSA, maybe they're just daunted by the process, or they're, you know, intimidated by those acceptance ratios we talked about earlier and worried that they're not as good as other people. What's your advice to that person who's on the fence about applying?
You got to start choosing yourself sooner or later. So the sooner you can do it, then I think the better off you're going to be. So just say yes to yourself, because there will be many people in the world who will say no to you for various reasons, whether or not they're right or wrong. It's just like, please just say yes to yourself and just try it, see what happens.
I want that on a t-shirt. Say yes to yourself. Make it happen.
Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you actually start doing it. It's like, oh, wow.
Yeah, right?
This is who I can become, the person I've always wanted to be.
I've always had the power. And Dan, you've given us so much sage advice today, but this is kind of a final caps into our conversation. You know, we have all these amazing young artists on the video call today. Some of them are going to be watching a recording of this. What's one thing that you want to leave these young artists with? Just one thought, one notion, one statement, regardless of whether or not we get to work with them at GSA.
Be gentle with yourselves.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Yeah, hold space for yourselves, love yourselves. Yeah, it's kind of all around that theme. Yeah.
There's something that we say at GSA quite a lot, which is "you are enough." And I think
yeah.
All of that. So, I know I say that to myself as much as I can. I'm guessing Dan does too, because Dan is enough. You all are enough. I am enough. And again, that goes regardless of whether or not you get into GSA. Again, I hope that it's ringing clear that Dan and I are just really excited to have a chance to, even if it's over Zoom, connect with you all, because we believe you're so important. As writers, as artists, as young people. You have a gift that is needed so much by the world. And you know, we're not always told that artists are valued or that we have, you know, viable careers ahead of us, but we do, you do. Dan and I are both making livings in the arts, and we could tell you a lot of other people who are doing it too. So we just think you're vitally important, and we're cheering you on. And keep writing, never stop writing. Well, that brings us to our time for today. Again, just a reminder, if your question didn't get answered today, or if you have other questions that come up, please email us. We're here. We're ready to answer your questions anytime. And don't forget to take that survey that you'll receive when I end the webinar, that will get sent to you via email after the webinar. Dan, thank you again so much for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have fun as you're writing. Have fun.
Beautiful. All right, y'all take care. Bye.